Welcome everybody. We are back for chapter 2 of Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo. I am still kind of in a little bit of euphoria around the fact that we have Jujutsu Kaisen back in some way, shape, or form in this sequel. So it is just kind of surreal to me that I'm here talking about it because I didn't actually start this channel while the original Jujutsu Kaisen was being serialized, and honestly it's a big regret of mine because it's one of my favorite series of all time. So I just am super happy that I get a chance to actually make content on a weekly running serialization of Jujutsu Kaisen. It just happens to be a sequel. So enough of that. We're going to dive right into chapter 2 here. It opens up with Usami, who was the man that was dispatching the orders to the Okkotsu siblings in the first chapter. It opens up with him and his assistant, seemingly Mino. They are basically, Mino is questioning Usami, like, are you really sure about this meeting? Like, without going through any of the proper protocols, like they could potentially have quarantines or like infectious diseases. We don't really know any unknown factors about them that could affect us. And Usami basically just says like they have no information on their culture, religion, their language, history, anything like that. So they don't know what could and could not potentially offend the Sumerians. Because if they treat them basically like as a quarantine species, like, oh, like don't come anywhere near us, they could potentially just decide to declare war, say forget diplomacy and go right to war, which would be obviously catastrophic for the humans. So they're just having to basically skip some of the basic protocols to just try to get conversations and diplomacy underway so that they can try to navigate this completely unknown scenario successfully. And then we have 2 Cimmerians show up for this meeting. And the first one is Jabaloma, which this dude freaks me out. I don't know about anybody else, but I find his design to be very unsettling. He actually reminds me a little bit of Cursed Spirit Tengen, or not Cursed Spirit, but Ascended, Evolved Tengen that we see after the events of the Shibuya incident. Once Tengen didn't assimilate with another star plasma vessel and evolved into more akin to a cursed spirit, they looked very similar to this Cimmerian right here. But it's the eyes, the creepy smile. It's got like the triple chin. He's just unsettling. I don't trust this diplomat right here. He's the diplomatic envoy on the behalf of the Cimmerians, and I don't like him. I'm just going to say that right now. I think he looks slimy and not going to trust him for a second. But we actually get introduced to Maru's twin brother, Cross. So we found out his name here. His name is Cross, and he is a dispatch officer. They, exchange some pleasantries, like thank you for the, the warm welcome that they've received. But Usami actually notices the fact that they are speaking Japanese. Like they just know Japanese. And, you know, they shake hands, they're given their, you know, best diplomatic political smiles, as we've all seen in real life, you know, when people want to take pictures or, you know, come off as being friendly relations, they put on that, you know, nice cheesy smile that we're all kind of like, that just doesn't feel quite right. And it's the same thing right here, because we know that there is an underlying tension that is at play right now, and it is going to heavily affect the future circumstances between these two parties. So they're doing a really good job giving off that energy. And Usami basically introduces himself, and he is the acting minister for the foreign affairs. And we get introduced to his subordinate, Mino. And they're just kind of like thinking things through about this meeting, and why didn't the US like let them know that they spoke Japanese. And Usami makes a great point in the fact that since they've already overcome the language barrier, they have the upper hand when it comes to gathering intel, which is a massively important thing when it comes to these sort of situations, because information is power. And the fact that language isn't even going to be an issue, that just gives them a huge leg up. And they sit down to have the meeting, and Jabaloma actually is like, well, we have a favor to ask. Can we have our representative present here? Like, can he be present here? And Usami's like, well, of course. Like, is there some reason that you wanted to ask first? And this is where, honestly, we get one of like the coldest lines about someone that I've seen in a while. And he says that it's because the concept of being unarmed is meaningless for him. And so he's saying, like, we cannot comfortably let him attend unless you understand that he has no hostile intentions. Because if this wasn't asked beforehand and this representative just showed up, his mere presence alone would feel hostile. And that's where we get this absolutely sick panel of the Sumerian king or captain of the ship. I don't know exactly how we want to refer to him. Let me know in the comments what you guys would prefer or what other people are saying. The thing is I'm not actually, even though I make YouTube videos, I'm not very active online in general. So I'm not sure if people have come up with like a name for this guy yet that is kind of just like a placeholder. But for now, I'm just going to go with like the captain, because he seemed like the captain of the mothership. So we'll go with the captain. But we get this epic panel of him in the doorway, and it's like all blacked out and shaded, and you can just see the white silhouettes of his eyes, all three of them, and he just looks insane, looks so awesome. I can't lie. This design that they created for this character is top notch. It absolutely fantastic character design. And Usami and Mino basically just crap their pants when this dude walks in the door, which, I mean, hey, fair. He's huge and just looks like a menace. But then we cut to seemingly after the meeting, and we see Usami and Mino's just like, I'm still alive, right? Like he's tweaking out. He's super stressed. He's just talking about how bad the scenario is. Like, and this is where he says something that I can see there might be some discourse potentially around this statement, and one that was made in the first chapter, because he says, like, no wonder they're saying it's on par with Ryoma and Sukuna. Now, I know that some people are going to take it a few different ways, like interpret it a few different ways, and that could either be like specifically the captain is on par with Sukuna, or the entirety of the 50,000 Samurians on their mothership are on par with Sukuna. And I think my perspective on it, it could be either one of those. It could be. I just would find it very hard to believe, at least, no, even though the captain looks insane, looks obviously incredibly powerful, and I have no doubt he is going to be incredibly powerful. Sukuna was, I mean, he was the king of curses. He was multi-generational, just the strongest sorcerer in history. And I would find it very hard to believe. If this guy was as strong as Sukuna, I'm sorry, they win. Like, they just straight up win, because not only would they have the captain who would be as strong as Sukuna, but then they would have still 50,000. Now, we don't know if all 50,000 of the Sumerians can utilize cursed energy or their sorcery, whatever. I don't know if we're going to get like a confirmed, different name for what they use. But someone like Sukuna plus let's even call it only 100 out of the 50,000 are able to use sorcery. It still doesn't matter because we already know that the sorcerers of this modern age, because of the peace that has been achieved, the threat level has gone way down. So the actual power of the modern day sorcerers in this story is much, much lower. So not only are they weaker than ever, it would just be so much overkill. But we'll see. I kind of interpret it more on the scale of how we saw, like, the scale of sorcerers and cursed spirits, and how it, goes from grade 4 all the way up to special grade. And also taking into account Kenjaku's conventional definition of what a special grade sorcerer is, and that's someone who can overthrow a country single-handedly. And I think my interpretation is that the Sumerians, this potential alien invasion, is special grade, that they can overthrow nations by themselves. So that's how I interpret it. Like, again, the captain is going to be extremely strong. He's not, at least until we see some stuff, I'm not putting him anywhere near Sukuna or Gojo. It's not happening for me yet. We'll wait to see. Still an awesome design, though. And it's also interesting to me because the events with the Shinjuku Showdown and everything with Sukuna was, I believe, 68 years ago. So I'm also curious because most people, if not all, who actually witnessed Sukuna's power are most likely not alive at this current time. So I don't know if they actually understand how strong Sukuna was, because they may not have actually seen him. I don't know if, like, Mei's bird streaming was recorded and they actually have the footage from that whole situation and it's just saved. And you can just watch it on YouTube. Just watch the Shinjuku Showdown over and over again. But that's just my little kind of tirade on this whole on par with Sukuna statements. I'm just going to wait it out and see. I'm not jumping to any conclusions. I'm just going to assume it means special grade and they can overthrow a country, which we already know. It seems like they could definitely take out Japan, seemingly without that much issue. So then this is where Usami kind of reiterates that point, and why I kind of lean towards that way is because he says they could easily take over their country if they really wanted to. Like, this meeting, they've made the positions crystal clear between the two. And I think that supports the fact that what I said before. And they just are talking and, assessing the whole situation, that, they're like, well, should we just say thank you for not invading us? But there's pushback on that of, well, we can't, regardless of if they have the upper hand and they could just take over, you can't just give in to their every demand either, because they need to try to regain or maintain some level of authority and power in this dynamic that's going on. So this is where actually we get to see, because this occurred prior to this meeting, all occurred prior to chapter 1. So this is actually where we got the setup for, like, conceal the fact that the Sumerian envoy is an alien, so Maru is an alien, and let him accompany Jujutsu sorcerers to school and on missions. And obviously, that is what happened in the first chapter. And then we go to the next page and we get a more detailed drawing. And I'm not going to talk too much about it because I've already kind of discussed about the captain and his design, but this panel is absolutely gorgeous. Yuji Iwasaka is a phenomenal manga artist, and I love how he is illustrating the captain especially. And it looks phenomenal. The dude, he's got aura. He's just aura farming apparently nonstop, 24/7. So Usami goes on to say that he's going to assign the Okkotsu siblings to the job. And Mino pushes back like, hey, I know they're talented, but aren't they too young for this? And Usami brings up the point that the Sumerians aren't invaders, but they are refugees. And so if they fit the definition of refugees from what they've disclosed, they basically, ever since the paranormal resolution 62 years ago, that treaty that was signed, there's been like growing sentiments of nationalism, and it's easy for an isolationist country like Japan to fall into exclusionary sentiments. And he doesn't want to repeat the same mistakes. And this whole situation is that he wants to avoid war at all cost. So he surmises that the best way to go about not having a war is they need to strive for true harmony. And he believes that they can't open up the Sumerians' heart with adult formalities, because there's too much, when it comes to adults especially, there's too much under the surface that's at play, that it's not actually going to be like true connection. So he needs the spirit of a new era, and that is what he is striving for. That's how they're going to achieve true harmony. And Mino brings up a good point. He's like, so you're really going to entrust the fate of Japan and the world to a couple teenagers, which, I mean, hey, we already saw, this is anime, this is manga. We already saw that happen once with Yuji and the gang. They were all teenagers. And, you know, we're just getting a repeat of that because that's what happens in shonen manga is the fate of the world, universe, everything is always up to some teenagers. And I am here for it. And obviously, so are you guys. But, you know, Usami rebuttals with the fact that, like, hey, grown-ups, we're going to do our share too. And that's going to be on the diplomacy side. That's going to be the nitty-gritty negotiations. That's going to be trying to tiptoe and balance on this tightrope between maintaining power and also not threatening or bringing aggression towards them from the Sumerians. We cut away. That is kind of the end of the Usami and Mino section for the diplomacy stuff. And we cut back to our current time with Yuka and Tsurugi. And Yuka is talking to Tsurugi and is like aliens. That's a wild leap that you're making there. And Tsurugi just is like, well, that's what that curse user told me. He said that aliens have come here. And this still, I believe it gets brought up in this chapter, but this is what kills me is you have Jujutsu sorcerers that deal with curse spirits, curse users. They're using basically superpowers. And, you know, that's all totally normal, acceptable. But apparently some aliens, now you're going too far. So that just still kills me. But hey, I get it. It's that they've only grown up around cursed energy and sorcery, especially within the Gojo clan. So, of course, that's normal to them. But aliens, if you haven't seen them, if they haven't been there, that's definitely shocking and a bit new. So, Tsurugi explains how all diplomatic missions with aliens have been Japan's responsibility since the security treaty. And the Inspector General says the aliens are being treated as special grade on par with Ryoma and Sukuna. Again, not going to, beat a dead horse on that, but I think there is multiple interpretations, and we're just going to have to wait and see what on par technically means. And she just makes an observation where, she hears Ryoma and Sukuna, and she's like, well, isn't, he's the one responsible for the scar on Grandpa's forehead, so on Yuta's forehead. And obviously we know that came from, body hopping to Gojo's and then back to his own body during the fight against Sukuna. And she questions like, well, you're going to believe, you're going to believe that curse user? And Tsurugi is like, yeah, he is a piece of trash, but he's like, I can trust his judgment at least. And he makes a very valid point because he's like, the human trafficking for Japanese citizens is like a huge business that generates billions of yen. And he's stepping away from that because of the aliens. And it's like, if that wasn't real, if he didn't think that it was legitimately credible or he had proof, he would not be stepping away from that because there's too much money in it, which is an extremely good point. And he's like, also, you saw it for yourself. Like, you saw Maru. You saw his literal third eye on his forehead. And Yuka tries to, kind of reconcile that with the fact that there's a lot of weird-looking sorcerers out there, which, like, fair point, there are, especially during JJK, we had Panda. We had a cursed corpse. a self-functioning cursed corpse that looked like a panda who wasn't actually a panda. So that is a good point, that there are some weird looking sorcerers out there. But, you know, Tsurugi's like, yeah, we've seen them missing eyes, but not with literally an extra eye. And well, Yuka's like, well, then let's check it out for sure, and like let's find out. And Tsurugi is like, well, we can't. Like, Usami introduced Maru as an inspector from the state party of the security treaty, which means they basically, even if he is an alien, the fact that he was introduced to them by Usami as not an alien and kept that under wraps means that for grunts like them, that's just not information that they're meant to be privy to, which is very true. And Yuka's just like, who said we'd check with Usami? Like, I didn't say we're going to go check with him. And he's like, so you're just going to ask Maru directly if he's an alien? And he says how he can't trust Maru. And she's like, well, you did say you trust that guy's judgment, right? Referring to the curse user. So then we get the transition to them actually going to see the curse user that they captured. And the curse user is like, well, I knew you'd come. Like, looking all smug. And they basically question him about, you know, that, well, he just the curse user surmises, he's like, oh, you guys you want to know about the aliens, right? And obviously that is the truth. Tsurugi's like, well, first, you know, start with how you got the intel on the aliens in the first place. And the curse user is like, well, just assume all the intel has been digitally leaked. And especially from like the government offices that are scrambling to maintain the systems without reconfiguring them. And he starts rattling off just a bunch of information on how the aliens are called Sumerians. And she's like, Yuka's like, well, hang on. You are just going to keep going with the premise that aliens are actually real. And this is where he says kind of what I was referring to earlier, because he's like, well, aren't you, you know, like, are you really that stupid? Because he's like, I thought you were Jujutsu sorcerers. He's like, you guys work with paranormal every day, but at the same time you're denying paranormal. And that's the whole point. Like, I believe I said it in my chapter 1 review, and I said it again in this one, where it's like you're living in the paranormal every day, but then you disregard or disbelieve this paranormal on this side. So it just doesn't make very much sense, which is a very good point. And Tsurugi says that they just want some kind of information that aliens have really come. Like, he just wants some sort of proof, not just hearsay, which is fair. I would also want that type of confirmation myself. And this guy just keeps going on. He's like, well, there's the mothership that contains 50,000 of them, and it's floating above the country as we speak. And they are like, how could a battleship how could a big spaceship carrying that many people just be floating above them without anybody noticing? And the curse user gives basically 2 options for how the mothership is hidden. And it's either one with barrier techniques, which we obviously know of, and I feel like it would function similarly to Tengen's barriers, like the concealing ones around Jujutsu High, and maybe even the ones around like the storehouse and the Tomb of the Stars. So if that is the case, then that's some pretty high level barrier techniques that they're using. But then he says the other option is that it's actually just advanced technology that they don't know about yet. And either way, they still traveled through space to get here. So he brings up the fact how they can probably be self-sufficient on their ship to an extent, but they'll hit the limit, and they'll hit their limit at some point because they still only have finite resources. So supplies got to be brought in before that happens. And he says that it's happening tomorrow at 8 p.m. at the Highlands in the Nagano prefecture. And if the barrier technique's visual effects are making the spaceship invisible, then it might weaken enough for sorcerers to catch a glimpse while the supplies are being loaded. So basically, as it's down, getting their supplies, that situation and the fact that it's in close proximity will allow sorcerers to be able to actually observe the spaceship only for that brief period of time. So he's like, hey, you should just go check it out for yourself. So they do. They actually are like, they go straight for the Highlands, and they're marching their way up top. And they are just heading to the top, and Yuka notices the ring around Tsurugi's neck. And, she points it out, like the ring, and Tsurugi grabs it and he's like, I'm not giving it back. Like and he brings up the fact that the three clans treated Granny, Maki, like she was some kind of failure, which we know absolutely is the truth with the fact of her extremely low amount of cursed energy. She couldn't see cursed spirits on her own without her glasses. She couldn't exorcise cursed spirits without cursed tools. So she was a failure as a sorcerer. But he brings up that she never gave up, and she shut him up with her power, which we obviously know is the case. And Yuka even thinks to herself, because she's like, shut him up. Wasn't it more like she just massacred her entire clan? And yes, Yuka, that is exactly what Maki did, and they deserved it. So Tsurugi brings up the fact that he wants to be just as powerful as Maki, which we already caught a glimpse of that from the first chapter. But obviously with Tsurugi and his heavenly restriction, we still need to get some more info on his specifically and how it works. And this is where we actually get to see them thinking that Yuka thinks like, I feel like we're both chasing after our own ideas of the truth. And I touched on this in the last chapter that they are, because they are both operating technically differently, but they're heading towards each what they believe to be true. So they're pursuing their true ideas and beliefs in the respective manner that they think is appropriate. And Tsurugi is saying that, or Yuka's thinking that she wanted him to give the ring back this whole time, and she realizes that Tsurugi has always wanted to give it back to her. And this is just, I'd like to see this because it's starting to change their relationship, because now they both know where they stand, and it's not as much as opposition as it is like two parallel paths that ultimately actually will coalesce into a point of Tsurugi being able to give the ring back to Yuka. And it's really beautiful, but then they finally come to the clearing at the top of the mountain, and we get this awesome panel of the two of them in the grassy field, and you have the giant mothership, the Nonax, up above them, standing straight up. And they're like, damn, like the aliens really are here. Like this is real. And he, because Yuka's like, well, okay, so this is the special grade case that's on par with Realm and Sukuna. And this is where Tsurugi says that Grandpa and Granny and the others were able to defeat Ryoma and Sukuna, which, I get it. They're talking, especially from their own perspective, they grew up with Yuta and Maki, and they're their grandkids. So, of course, most of the stories they probably heard around it obviously had Yuta and Maki being a major player of it. And of course they were. In the Shinjuku Showdown, both Maki and Yuta were extremely important to the plans. Everybody was from the good guys' side. And it really was a super mega team effort, especially after Gojo put in, a ton of work in the, first half of the battle. And they are basically like, they don't know why the aliens have come there, but no matter what happens, it's up to them, because according to the treaty, the Jujutsu sorcerers are the one that are responsible for taking care of paranormal situations. And they're just both looking up at this spaceship, because I imagine even for a Jujutsu sorcerer, you become desensitized to the cursed spirit and the occult type of stuff, spooky ghost stuff. But like seeing a legitimate giant mothership that is literally aliens would still be kind of a crazy thing to witness. And they make the point that both Grandpa and Granny are both gone, and they don't stand a chance the way they are now, which 100% is the truth. They clearly need to level up, but they both make the declaration that they want to be just like Maki for Tsurugi and Yuta for Yuka, which is just a beautiful moment of them. They have their ideas of what they're trying to pursue and the level of strength for a sorcerer that they want to become. But we leave Yuka and Tsurugi, and we cut to Maru and Cross. So we get to see Maru come across Cross and is basically immediately Cross that wants nothing to do with them, which we already know they have an estranged relationship. And he's basically like, hey, go back to the Earthling sorcerers. He's like, and Maru's like, well, why is that really necessary for me to go back to the sorcerers? Because the Earthlings are just like us Sumerians. Like there are good people and there are bad people too. It's the same. But unless our ideas of what's good and bad are the same, it's meaningless. And well, that was Cross's rebuttal. And Maru was like, well, they are the same. But Cross is like, well, that's not for you to decide. It seems that our opinions are split on the matter between conflict and coexistence. And that's scary because they're basically 50-50 right now on if they want to just go into conflict, into war, or if they want to coexist. So clearly they're going to kind of wait and play this out to see when the potential time, if they are going to end up attacking, they're trying to assess when, I'm assuming, the right time would be. But Maru is obviously extremely against this and is saying how conflict is absolutely wrong. But Cross is looking at this from a very logical and militaristic standpoint, where he is like, well, if that's what you think, you need to go spend more time with them and present your evidence for consideration. Like, that's your job as a warrior. And that is a very good point. Like, go get the evidence. If this is what you truly believe, no one's just going to like take your word from this one encounter as, okay, yeah, we're all good now. So Maru is like, oh, like, aren't you going back to the ship? And Cross is like, well, I have my own job to do. And this is where Maru says, if you're not going back to the ship, like, how about we get breakfast tomorrow morning? And Cross is just like, I'm busy, and then dips out. So this is that scenario where, we heard Maru talk about the fact that he's tried to patch things up with his brother constantly, and it's just never gone through. And it looks like that's still the case currently. And it's really sad because you can see he's really trying and giving the effort, but Cross just wants nothing to do with him. So we'll have to wait and see and get more on their relationship. But then we cut back to Yuka and Tsurugi. They're kind of making their way, I'm assuming, home, but then they have to split up. And Tsurugi, we actually comes across who he believes to be Maru on top of this building in the city. And he's just like, well, hey, if you're hanging out up here, people are going to think you're going to jump, and like they're going to call the cops on you. And he's just trying to make like small talk with who he thinks it's Maru, and Cross is just like, shut up, don't talk to me, and just dips out, just jumps, disappears. And the chapter ends with Tsurugi's just like, what the heck is his problem? Like, what happened? Because clearly, even though he can't trust Maru, he experienced his personality on that whole first day and that first mission. And this is just a complete opposite. And he's like, what the heck is his problem? Like, and he looks really pissed off, actually. So very funny ending to the chapter, just like where they decided to end it and cut off on like this situation. But clearly Cross said he is busy and has a mission, and he is now in the city. So I'm curious as to what this mission is, and if it is potentially not going to be very friendly. So we will have to wait and see. But this is where I am going to end it. I appreciate you if you've made it all the way to the end of this video. Feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed it and I was able to, provide some value for you. And I really would like to hear from you guys in the comments. Just what are your thoughts so far with the first two chapters? What are you most looking forward to or hoping to see from Modulo? And, just generally anything that you'd like to discuss when it comes to Jujutsu Kaisen, just let me know. But I will catch you guys in the next chapter, and I hope you have a great night or day wherever you are, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.